The next topic is challenges of approaches to first language acquisition. We have just discussed a number of theories in relation to their contribution in the studies of first language acquisition, and now we will see the challenges that these theories and their studies have encountered, and a lot of criticisms or other critique done by different researchers in their understanding of these theories and how they have come up with the opposing arguments with regard to their claims. First language acquisition has been an area of ongoing research by advocates of behaviorism and nativism. So you have people who support, who actually propagate these theories. We have people who advocate behaviorism, and then we also have different researchers that have been done in the area of nativism to support their claim. Now that includes Skinner from behaviorism, Chomsky from nativism, Piaget also from the cognitive, or you can say cognitive area or cognitive theory, and then Vygotsky. Vygotsky is another name who has done his contribution in the study of sociocultural theories with regard to language development. So if someone needs to conduct experiment in the area, one needs to study the relevant rich literature and challenges to gain the necessary knowledge. So it's not just about reading their claims or reading their theories. One has to come up with more critical views and the dynamic, or you can say variation, in their theories and in their studies conducted by a number of other researchers, so to be able to come up with a required justification to further add any research into these theories. Let's see what are the challenges these theories have faced. So first of all, we will look at the challenges to the behavioral approaches. Now in this we see that Skinner's theories have been there in the behavioral approaches, and since he comes from the behaviorist school of thought, his theories attracted a number of critics, not the least among them Noam Chomsky as well, and who has written against the verbal behavior, or who has criticized the verbal behavior theory of Skinner. Now when we look at it, it's been an assumption that during that period, not only that, but even today, no one would agree that Skinner's model of verbal behavior adequately accounts for the capacity to acquire language. So in the verbal behavior written by Skinner, he proposed that it's just the stimulus response process that enables a learning development. Now the major criticism says that a theory based on conditioning and reinforcement is hard-pressed to explain the fact that every sentence you speak or write, with a few trivial exception, is novel and never before uttered either by you or by anyone else. Now these novel utterances are nevertheless created by very young children as they literally play with language, and that same creativity continues on into adulthood throughout one's life. Now, in an attempt to broaden the base of behavioral theory, some psychologists proposed modified theoretical position. One of these positions was mediation theory, in which meaning was accounted by the claim that the linguistic stimulus, a word or sentence, elicits a mediating response that is self-stimulating. Now, according to Osgood, the self-stimulation is a representational mediation process, a process that is really covert and invisible, acting within the learner. Mediation theory still left many questions about language unanswered. The abstract nature of language and the relationship between meaning and utterance, they were also left unanswered. resolved. The attempt to account for first language acquisition within a behavior framework was made by Jenkins and Palermo, and they claimed that the child may acquire frames of a linear pattern of sentence elements and learn the stimulus response equivalences that can be substituted within each frame. Imitation was an important, if not essential, aspect of establishing stimulus response association. By this theory too, we see that again some kind of discrepancies that have emerged, and this theory also failed to account for the abstract nature of language, for the child's creativity, and for the interactive nature of language acquisition. Then we have challenges to nativist approaches. Now, in the subsequent years, the generative rule-governed model in the Chomskyan tradition was challenged. The assumption underlying this tradition is that those generative rules or items are connected serially with one connection between each pair of neurons in brain. Now, looking at it, you can see the important emergence of the area that has come to be known as PDF, which is parallel distributed processing, PDP, based on the notion that information is processed simultaneously at several levels of attention. Now, according to PDP model, sentence which has phonological, morphological, syntactic, lexical, semantic, discourse, sociolinguistic, and strategic properties is not generated by a series of rules. Rather, sentences are the result of simultaneous interconnection of a multitude of brain cells. Closely related to PDP concept is a branch of psycholinguistic inquiry called connectionism. Multiple connections, for example, it proposes that connectionism in which neurons in the brains are said to form multiple connections. Each of the 100 billion nerve cells in the brain may be linked to as many as 10,000 of its counterparts. Now, in this approach, experience leads to learning by strengthening particular connections, sometimes at the expense of weakening others. For example, the first language acquisition of English regular past tense forms by children may proceed as series of connections. First, a child may confidently connect the form went with the verb go. Then children will often perceive another connection, that is the regular ed suffix attached to a verb, and start using the word goed. Finally, with more complex connections, children will perceive goed as incorrect and maintain both connections, the ed form connected to most verbs and the went form as spatial connections. Now, according to such accounts, there are no rules of grammar. Instead, the systematicities of syntax emerge from the set of learned associations between language functions and base and past tense forms. So you see that even connectionism has pointed out that there is no such thing as rules of grammar, but rather it is through the systematicities of syntax that children set to produce. Another challenge is that of emergentism, a perspective proposed by Grady, which is emergentism. The complexity of language emerges from relatively simple developmental process being exposed to a massive and complex environment. The interactions that constitute language are associations, billions of connections which coexist within a neural system as organisms coexist within an ecosystem. This perspective disagrees sharply with earlier nativist views by suggesting that there is no inborn universal grammar. To conclude, the behaviorist and nativist approaches face immense challenges by the contemporary researchers about their claim on first language acquisition. Some of the recent studies completely disregard the concept's stimulus-response process as well as the universal grammar concept.